up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at noon, the United States says it plans to use new sanctions imposed on North Korea following the Sony hacking to sever Pyongyang's links to global financial institutions. Muslim groups in Europe and elsewhere fear Charlie Hebdo's new cover featuring the Prophet Mohammed could worsen tensions and lead to fresh attacks in France. Plus, Korea's all-important exports to China are expected to rebound this year after the first fall in 5 years last year. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Wednesday, January 14th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. We begin with news that the United States is moving to seal North Korea off from the international financial system as it looks to starve the leadership in Pyongyang of cold, hard cash.
The latest development comes after President Barack Obama launched new sanctions against the regime for its alleged hacking of Sony pictures. Shin Se-min reports.
The U.S. is targeting the remaining financial links North Korea has to the international financial system as retaliation for Pyongyang's alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures late last year. Speaking before members of Congress Tuesday, Daniel Glazer, Assistant Secretary for Terrorist Financing at the U.S. Treasury, said past sanctions had already crippled hundreds of overseas banks from doing business with the North, but said the U.S. could go further.
So we could target any North Korean government agency, we could target any North Korean government official, and then once so targeted, we could apply sanctions with respect to any individual or entity who's providing them in turn material support or any individual entity that they in turn control.
Glazer said the U.S. is targeting the North Korean elite source of hard currency and its ability to send back cash through Chinese commercial banks to increase the cost for North Korea. An Sung-kim, the top U.S. official on North Korea, who was also at the briefing, said that Pyongyang is losing friends, even its longtime ally, China.
I think what we have seen in our cooperation with China is that China is working with us more effectively and trying to stifle North Korea's dangerous activities. And it's an ongoing effort. I think all of us need to do more, including China.
Regarding the North's recent cozying up with Russia, the U.S. official said Moscow remains committed to the shared goal of denuclearization. Responding to critics who say the sanctions don't go far enough, Kim said the latest measures are very strong and they'll allow Washington to target anyone that tries to provide material support to the North. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
North Korea, meanwhile, has publicly stated its desire to talk directly with the United States. This comes a matter of days after Pyongyang offered to temporarily suspend nuclear testing if Washington scrapped its major joint military drills with Seoul later this year. Hwang Seung-hee reports.
North Korea has reiterated its call for talks with the U.S., this time at the United Nations. In a press conference Tuesday local time, North Korea's deputy ambassador to the UN claimed many things would be possible on the Korean peninsula if Washington took up its offer. That offer was made last week, promising a temporary suspension of nuclear tests in return for the cancellation of the U.S.-South Korea joint military exercises this year. The North Korean official claimed Washington's rejection of its proposal showed it will remain hostile.
The United States has shown once again that they will continue to increase attack military capabilities in the South Korea, while requesting us to not to have our own national defense capabilities.
Seoul and Washington insist their annual joint drills scheduled for early March are defensive in nature, but Pyongyang sees them as a practice for war. North Korea's overture follows its leader Kim Jong-un's New Year's speech, in which he outlined his willingness to meet with President Park Geun-hye. Both South Korea and the U.S. have made clear they're open to talks if North Korea takes credible steps towards denuclearization. A South Korean government official said North Korea's latest remarks at the UN is an extension of its attempts to end its diplomatic isolation, and added there is nothing new to its offer. Analysts say the latest press conference is part of North Korea's attempts to increase pressure to cancel the joint military drills and to build up excuses for a possible nuclear test if things don't go its way. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, ahead of one of the two major combined military drills between South Korea and the United States in early March, the two allies kicked off a two-day joint naval drill on Tuesday. North Korea was fast to condemn the exercise, saying it was an intentional provocation that ruins prospects for inter-Korean talks. Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
Two U.S. Aegis destroyers, including the 9,200-ton USS Mustin, are currently in the East Sea for a joint training with South Korea's 3,200-ton Aegis destroyer, Kwanggeto the Great. This is their first military training since North Korea called for a stop to the joint military exercises, as one of the conditions for the two Koreas to engage in dialogue. Seoul and Washington say their drills are defensive in nature, but North Korea is not convinced. Pyongyang characterizes the drills as a rehearsal for a northward invasion. And instead of responding to South Korea's calls on numerous occasions to come to the negotiating table, North Korea continues with its nuclear threats. The regime's state-run newspaper Rodong Shinmun said on Tuesday that Pyongyang is pursuing nuclear and economic development at the same time. It went on to say the regime will follow its military-first policy to the very end, while continuing to develop its nuclear capabilities. With Seoul and Washington not budging from the joint military drills and vowing to go ahead with the large-scale joint training set for March, eyes turn to how that's going to affect the prospects of inter-Korean dialogue. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
China and Japan have agreed to set up a special hotline to prevent clashes in and above water surrounding an island chain claimed by both countries in the East China Sea. The two countries reportedly reached consensus on the matter following talks between their defense ministries earlier this week. Although details of the meeting were not released, the talks reportedly focused on how communications will take place and the radio frequency that will be used for the hotline. The system will launch once the technical details have been ironed out, but experts in China are quite skeptical about this week's talks.
Now, one of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's closest aides is urging Korea not to attach any preconditions to a possible bilateral summit between the two countries. Abe's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga said on Tuesday that the issue of Japan's sexual enslavement of Korean women before and during World War II should not stand in the way of a potential leaders' summit. His remarks come a day after President Park Geun-hye told reporters that she was open to holding a summit with Abe. President Park added, however, that in order for the summit to be productive, the sex slavery issue must first be addressed. Speaking on the issue on Tuesday, Suga said Japan maintains its stance that it should not be made into a political and diplomatic issue. And a group of Korean lawmakers is in Japan right now for a three-day visit that includes talks with Japanese parliamentary leaders and could also include a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The group is affiliated with the Korea-Japan Parliamentarians Union and is led by ruling Saenuri Party Supreme Council member Seo Chung-won. Last October, President Park Geun-hye met with a Japanese parliamentary delegation that delivered a message from Abe, including a request for a summit between the two leaders. The Japanese body is headed by former Finance Minister Nukaga Fukushiro and a member of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, of which Shinzo Abe is the head. The two groups aim to enhance bilateral cooperation through annual visits and exchanges of dialogue. Back here in domestic politics, and the chairman of Korea's ruling Saenuri Party has stressed that his party's goal this year is to revitalize the economy and boost cooperation with the main opposition party. In his New Year's address on Wednesday, Kim Moo-sung said, Korea should not miss the golden time for revitalizing the economy this year. He compared Korea's current economic situation to that of Japan's stagnation that started all the way back in the early 1990s. Kim said the government will push forward with its three-year economic plan with the aim of raising the country's growth rate to 4%. The party chief also stressed the need to reform the public pension system and said the ruling party is going to work closely with the opposition to ensure state affairs run smoothly.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea, connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about 11.
The number of people who found work last year here in Korea made its biggest leap in 12 years. However, taking a closer look into the numbers, this doesn't necessarily mean the country's employment situation is improving. Choo-sun reports.
The number of Koreans who found jobs in 2014 jumped a 12-year high. Statistics Korea says nearly 25.6 million people found work last year, up more than 530,000 compared to the year 2013. Looking back at the past 5 years, the yearly increase in the number of people with new jobs had expanded significantly. The country's employment rate also gained slightly to reach a 17-year high of 60.2%. By industry, new jobs were created in manufacturing and health and welfare, while fewer jobs were gained in agriculture, fisheries, and finance. However, experts say a large portion of the newly employed were previously inactive in the economy. Many of them are in their 50s and 60s and have returned to the workforce in temporary positions. That, coupled with a decline in the number of jobs for people in their 30s, shows that Korea's job market remains unstable. In fact, the unemployment rate was the highest for young people from the ages of 15 to 29, jumping 9 percentage points, the biggest leap since 1999. The unemployment rate has also climbed steadily in recent years. What's even more grim for this group is that 1 out of every 5 young people who found jobs started with contracts of less than a year. A recent OECD report said only 11% of temporary workers secured permanent employment after a year, and the rest either remained or were let go. 최유선, Arirang News.
Korea's exports to China are projected to rebound this year after a poor 2014, which saw Korea's shipments to the world's second-largest economy dip for the first time in 5 years. Connie Kim has more.
Korea's exports to China are forecast to rebound this year. According to a survey conducted by Kotra, outbound shipments to China are expected to jump 4.5% to $147 billion in 2015. That's because of the economic recovery forecast in the United States, which is expected to raise Beijing's outbound shipments to the U.S. About half of Korean exports to China are intermediary goods that are used to manufacture finished products and are re-exported to the U.S. and Europe. Experts also say the free trade agreement between Korea and China that's expected to take effect in the second half of this year will boost Korea's outbound shipments to its largest trading partner. Last year, however, Korea's exports to China dropped for the first time in 5 years. Sluggish recoveries in China and Europe were mainly to blame for the drop. The fall also came from China improving their own supply capacity of parts and intermediary goods. And experts point out that local exporters should now focus on shipping finished goods to China. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, oil prices continue their free fall. They're now at a near 6-year low as one of the big OPEC producers has stood by the group's decision not to cut output. And that would, of course, make prices higher if they were to do that. And it looks like the oil prices are only going to continue falling, surprisingly enough. Our Connie Lee has this report.
It's another drop in oil prices. Crude prices slumped to almost a 6-year low on Tuesday, with Brent trading around the same level as U.S. crude oil. U.S. crude lost 5% at $45.89 a barrel, and Brent plunged 7% to $46.59 a barrel. Oil prices tumbled after United Arab Emirates, a major OPEC producer, defended the group's decision not to cut output to try and balance a glut in the market. Oil prices have dropped 60% over the last 6 months due to rising production, such as more U.S. shale oil and weaker demand in Europe and slowing Asian economies. And if you thought oil prices have gone as low as they can go, think again. Analysts believe prices will fall lower longer. Earlier this week, a U.S. bank Goldman Sachs cut its average oil forecast, saying the prices need to stay low for longer in order to end a global supply glut. This year's forecast for Brent fell from about $84 a barrel to about $50. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Now let's get a check on the global headlines we're following this Wednesday lunchtime here in Seoul. For that, we're joined by Eunice Kim with those stories.
Eunice, the terror alert remains at its highest level in Paris since last week's string of deadly attacks. And 1 week after the slaughter at Charlie Hebdo, the magazine is hitting back with a defiant issue with a cartoon of Prophet Mohammed on the cover. And this special edition is set to be sold within hours from now.
Yeah, that's right, Jin-joo. When daylight hits, the cover has already attracted a firestorm of criticism and threats in some cases. And the provocative satirist magazine is said to publish 3 million copies of the edition in multiple languages, including Arabic. Our Son Jung-in has this story.
Paris remains on high alert, with armed police and soldiers stepping up inspections around institutions, public places, media outlets, and Jewish schools. More threats of terror attacks have emerged in the country, including one from an al-Qaeda offshoot in North Africa. It threatened to carry out more strikes on French soil if the satirical weekly Charlie Hebdo publishes the latest edition, which has a cartoon of the Prophet Mohammed on the front cover. The newspaper has already unveiled the front page of the January 14th edition. It shows a caricature of the Prophet holding a sign that says "I am Charlie" in French under the banner "All is forgiven."
Then there was nothing else but this idea of drawing Mohammed, "I am Charlie," and I looked at him. He was crying, and over it I wrote, "All is forgiven." I cried, and it was the front page.
French Muslim leaders urged their community to remain calm and respect the right to freedom of expression. Prime Minister Manuel Valls said France was at war against terrorism and extremism, not against Islam. The Muslim community is France's second largest religious group. Meanwhile, separate ceremonies were held in Paris and Jerusalem for the victims of last week's terror attacks. President François Hollande led a solemn ceremony paying tribute to 3 police officers who were killed in the line of duty. In Israel, thousands mourned the passing of 4 Jewish Frenchmen gunned down in an attack at a kosher supermarket on Friday. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And turning now to the United States, President Barack Obama is preparing a plan to boost cybersecurity amid news of major hack attacks against U.S. companies like Sony Pictures. Cybersecurity has jumped to the top of the leader's agenda this year, and the White House is said to already be in talks with leaders of the Republican-led Congress, where related bills will be debated and potentially passed. President Obama wants to incentivize information sharing by companies hit by cyber attacks. He also wants to create new powers for law enforcement to probe and prosecute cybercrime and hand courts power to shut down entities found to have launched denial of service attacks. Pope Francis has kicked off his week-long tour through Asian countries. He is in Sri Lanka today, where he called for a pursuit of truth. not for the sake of opening old wounds, but rather as a necessary means of promoting justice, healing, and unity. Sri Lanka is still dealing with the effects of a quarter-century-long civil war amid lingering accusations of atrocities. Pope Francis will also beatify the country's first saint in a public mass, Indian-born missionary Joseph Vaz, who was captured in Ceylon on accusations of being a spy. This is the first time the majority Buddhist nation has hosted a pontiff since the end of its civil war in 2009.
Good afternoon, I'm Eoh Jin-joo here with your latest weather updates. Now we have a mild winter day in store for us today, but lots of clouds will be hovering around the peninsula throughout the day. And as we can see, some rain clouds have already formed and they began dropping rain onto Jeju Island, and now it has been spread to some of the southern coastal areas. So Jeju will have between 5 and 30 millimeters of rainfall, but southern regions will see less than 5 millimeters. But note that the rain in Jeju could linger till tomorrow morning. But temperature-wise, it should be as mild as yesterday, as daytime high in Seoul will climb up to 6, while Daegu and Gwangju should peak at 9 and 8, and Busan will reach 10 this afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. Jeju Island will rise to 11, while Daejeon and Dokdo will be getting up to 7, but Mount Keungang remains quite chilly. Now Seoul will see mix of rain and snow falling on Friday evening. Then the temperatures will briefly drop on Saturday with the low of -6, but the temperature will rebound onto the mild side again on Sunday. Now that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that's all we have for you on this Wednesday afternoon.
Yes, do join us again at the same time on Thursday. Until then, goodbye.